Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. I'm Paul Clark and welcome to my studio. So, what have I got for you lovely lot today? Well, a few weeks back in one of Margot's weekly challenges in our Facebook group, she set a little project called What's in My Kitchen. Now, one picture in particular caught my eye because some of you recently have been asking me how I would go about painting fire. So these two teapots or kettles, whatever you want to call them, I thought would be a great idea to try and paint those and also show you how I would go about painting fire. And we're definitely going to be taking a bit of a mixed media approach on this one. So stick about to the end because I've got some great paintings by the Facebook group to show you of this very picture. So come and join me and we'll paint this step by step together. So here is the excellent photo reference which I got from Pixabay. Okay, so for today's materials, my paper is some Arches, it's cold press finish, 300 pound, 100% cotton, super thick so it won't need stretching, but of course any decent watercolour paper will do. And my colours are cadmium orange, scarlet lake, burnt sienna, cobalt blue, phthalo blue, Payne's grey and Mars black. Now you could use any black like lunar black or lamp black, but I've chosen Mars black today because it's the most granulating colour I know and I'm after lots of texture today. And for my brushes I'm going to be using this large Harkay, a 3/4 inch flat, number 12 and number 6 round, and this 32 colour set of Inscribe soft pastels. And these are the chalky based pastels as opposed to oil pastels. Okay, so first of all, here's a little tip for drawing things which are symmetrical, like these kettles. Now, if you give yourself a centre line, it will just help you see both sides being roughly equal. You could even use a scrap of paper to check. Or, if you wanted to be really accurate, simply use a sheet of tracing paper, sketch the outline, flip it over. Yeah, that's not too bad. You obviously need to take those centre lines out once you're done, but if you want the drawing template, as always, it's free to download from my website, link in the description below. Off we go, and I'm starting using my Harkay brush and completely wetting the full sheet of paper. Now, using my number 12 brush, I'm starting with the flames because I want to make sure these colours go down onto white paper to get them as bright as possible. And I'll list all the colours I'm using below. This is Scarlet Lake, but any bright red will do. And here, although it's not on the reference photo, I thought it would be good to add a little reflection of the flame in the spout. And you can see the burning gas at its source has got this lovely bright blue colour. Next, I'm going to be getting a base wash down. I'm using my flat brush and I'm not trying to get neatly inside all the pencil lines. I'm just getting this wash down nice and quickly, mixing and letting the colours blend on the paper. All of this going in while the paper's still very wet, and I'll list all the colours I'm using below. Now, I'm not trying to match the photo reference exactly, but I do want a nice dark background because I do want those kettles to stand out nicely. And just to get a little variety and interest in my darks, I am using a combination of the Mars Black and my usual Payne's Grey. Now, I'm definitely after a lot of texture in this painting today, so I'm splatting in some fairly thick consistency Mars Black and building up the layers. And the paper is still very much in its damp stage, so I'm still getting some fairly soft edges. And here I'm just taking a number 12 brush and lifting out some of those highlights. Next, I'm just splatting in here some clean water, and because the paper's still damp, you can see I'm getting these really lovely motley effects. It's a bit like the salt technique, but the effect is just slightly more subtle. So now we need to let this totally dry, so it's a perfect time for a short break. And how about trying for the first time some acorn coffee? So next I'm going to be painting around the shape of these kettles, or should we call them coffee pots from now on, with a very dark value, and I'll list all the colours I'm using below. Because I don't want any hard edges, I'm softening with clean water to get a more natural transition into the background. And here I'm just painting around that little section of the handle that I missed out when I painted the background in. Now for this really dark value here, I'm painting in quite a thick consistency. Picked up a bit of burnt sienna there on my brush by mistake. That's all good, that's all part of watercolour. Next, I've switched to my number 6 brush and I'm putting in some finer detail splats. Then again, I've let that dry and then I'm coming back with my number 12 brush to create some more contrast with the background. Okay, so now it's time for some of these smaller details, and I'm using again my number 6 brush and some Payne's Grey. And my hair's getting in the way, sorry about that. To my number 12 brush, but please feel free to use whichever brush you're more confident with. Just a little touch of flame reflection with some cadmium orange. Now you will notice the two lids are slightly different in design, this one with a little ridge on it, and the one on the right is just tilting forward a little bit. Here again, using clean water to soften the edge and get a more natural transition. Okay, so now for the next phase, I'm letting that totally dry again. Then I'm starting re-wetting this part of the kettle, teapot, whatever we're going to call it. Then straight into the wet with the Mars Black, leaving plenty of gaps and spaces where those flames are. Now for the spout, and this is quite a tricky one because you need that sense of light along its top edge so it stands out against the background, but you also need this dark value on the bottom edge, so I've purposely left the background, which sits below the spout, much lighter so it stands out, if that makes sense. So it's important to remember that all these layers painted on top are watery and transparent enough to see your painting below, and blues always help to create that steely feel. And while I've still got the blue on my brush, let's just bring out these gas flames a little. Number 6 brush here, as I'm now beginning to bring out some of the finer details. Now, we often talk about our paintings going through the ugly stage, and we're definitely at that point now, but you've just got to paint your way through it. Softening the bottom edge here with some clean water. Now, this spout is always going to be a challenge to look convincing as it's facing directly towards us, but I'm just going to paint what I see. Again here, wetting the edges to get a soft transition. very watery wash here, which will allow me to drop in a nice wet in wet shadow. Now this could be the third layer or glaze that I've painted here, so it's a good reason to use decent quality watercolour paper. Now really cheap rubbish will just begin to break down. Let's add in here a little bit of warmth for interest. Now you may be thinking, why have I used Mars Black as well as Payne's Grey? Well, it's just that Mars Black is so heavily granulating, I didn't want the granulating effect everywhere. And as well as that, the Payne's Grey has that slight blue tint to it, which is different from Mars Black, which is just that little bit warmer. Back to my number 6 brush for some details and a view of the top of my head. Or is that a hedgehog? Definitely trying to get that old, well-used look here, so a bit of dry brush will help with the effect. So at this stage I'm analysing the painting and I'm thinking that the background is far too fussy and is fighting a little with the kettles. So I'm going to reduce the contrast with some washes on top, as well as introducing some more colour. Now there's definitely a lot of old rusty texture on these kettles, so I'm just splatting in some burnt umber. And just reducing its strength by dabbing with a tissue. mixed media time now, and I'm using a white pastel pencil to really punch out these white highlights. But you could use some white gouache or acrylic. Now, I've been asked recently by several people, how do I sharpen my pastel pencils? Now, you can get special pencil sharpeners for that very job, but I've never had that much success with them, so I just use a nice sharp scalpel. And one of the reasons why I like to use a pastel pencil for these highlights is that you can smudge and blend with your finger to get some soft edges. Next, it's time to get my set of soft pastels out, and this was a fairly cheap set of 32 colours. They're made by Inscribe. Laying them flat to apply the colour, and again they're beautiful for smudging with your finger, which is perfect for this flame effect. And I'm using a selection of oranges, reds and yellows. Now, so that flame doesn't look too solid, I'm adding some black in between some of these gaps. And I'm pretty much doing my own thing here. I'm not trying to copy that photo reference exactly. And let's add in a little bit of that bright blue gas as well. There we go, all done, and this one in just about 3 hours. And because I've used a lot of pastel on this one, I am going to spray it with some pastel fixative. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll give it a go. Now, coming up now, as promised, are some paintings of kettles by the Facebook group. Now, you know how I always say, make it your own? Well, here's a classic example how these different artists have really put their own interpretation on and made them their own. So, please check those out. And in the meantime, please don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already. It is free. Leave a comment. I do read every single one. Obviously, I can't reply to them all. Of course, I'll see you all again next week for another Watercolour Wednesday. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.